let's say you and I owned Lucasfilm, okay, or like we got to make decisions there.
Mhm.
And by the way, no judgment. This is not to hurt anyone's feelings or anything like that, but this is just two Star Wars fans. We're just Star Wars nerds. We're talking about what we would do. All right, don't get bent out of shape over it. So I'm not on Twitter anymore, so you can't tag me. All right. So, okay, so what I would do is I would fire Kathleen Kennedy.
Mhm.
I would promote Dave Filoni to the head of Lucasfilm, and I would ask Jon Favreau if he wants to take um, a I don't know about a presidential position, but maybe to be like in tandem with John. Him and John could run it.
Yeah.
Dave and John could run it.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
maybe he's got a lot of other stuff going on because I know he's not like married to Lucasfilm. He does stuff for Disney and he does his own stuff and all that. So,
Mhm.
anyways, in this fantasy, they all say yes and they go on to lead certain Star Wars projects. I would take a lot of people that Disney hired at Lucasfilm, right? Because Lucasfilm was an amazing company before Disney took it, and they interjected a lot of their own staff, and they fired a ton of the OG people who worked at Lucasfilm and were
And
working
dropped
with George
relationships with a lot of
and
people they worked
destroyed
with before.
relationships. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like these are the guys who like built Lucasfilm with George and they just canned them. I would get rid of a ton of Disney employees that were interjected during the merger. And I would call up all the old folk who built Lucasfilm with George and were working at Lucasfilm, and I would ask, "Hey, would you like your job back? And I'll
Mhm.
give you this compensate. I'll make it worth your while." We'd get those guys back. LucasArts would be reinstated. We would start immediate production on a new KOTOR. We would remaster all the old ones, not remake. We would remaster the same story. And then we would, for animation, I would say we would. Clone Wars is done, but we can go in between and we can create a whole series around the son of Dathomir, which is a comic series that was never created in animation, but it was amazing. It was one of the best series. It was with Darth Maul and Count Dooku, and it really told the story in between there from season 5 to season 6, where Maul was captured. And I think that in animated form, in a Clone Wars fashion, would be like everyone would watch that. I would then get a show on young Palpatine, essentially just the Darth Plagueis novel, and I would have it as a series or as a movie or maybe a trilogy, perhaps a movie. Screw shows, movie. Let's do a trilogy, and then I would scrap the sequels. I would redo them completely. So we could do deep fake, whatever, but we would get Mark Hamill back. We'd get Harrison Ford, and we would just have them younger. And I would take it from pretty much maybe just a few years after Return of the Jedi.
Mm.
And we would tell the story that happens in between all that. Episode 7, 8, 9 doesn't exist. But I would take elements from those stories. Like Kylo Ren was really cool. I would take Kylo Ren. I would take Rey, but I would change her completely. I wouldn't make her so much of a Mary Sue, so much of a perfect being. Then I would work on. I would have them do a perhaps like a Jango Fett story, something like that.
Yeah.
His younger years before Boba, before all that, before the Clone Wars, before Count Dooku even came in contact with him, because he has a really cool story of when he was a kid, and I would go to his like youth, and I would make a show or a movie about that, and Jaster Muriel and all that. We could do a young Yoda. We could do. I don't know about Mace Windu coming back. I think it's just too fan fictiony. Like that's something for like my fan film. It's like it's a
Yeah.
fan film. It's not real, right?
Yeah.
But I think him coming back ain't really all that. Just too fake.
Hmm.
But it's possible. What else? What would you do?
Well, I mean, to start with, I do like the idea of like whether Kathy exits after contract or is actually fired. I think she needs to go for sure. And I also like the idea of John and Dave, coming to the fold. But I think this is the thing, right? I think like let's say if this fantasy is happening, right?
It's happening. Hey,
Because like Mark, dude, a couple of weeks ago, like Mark blew my mind when he said that like Disney would maybe eventually divest Star Wars or sell Star Wars, right? I was like, there ain't no way. And then like I thought about it, and the more I thought about it, I was like, it's actually possible.
I don't think so.
So, well, let's just say it happened
Shocked.
and we got it, or let's say like the fan collective got a hold of it or something like, and it's just everybody's got it, and we put like proposals through like a thing, and then the fan base votes, et cetera, right? I think regardless of whatever you do, you have to come out with a statement that implies that you are going to do things way differently, right? Because like without that, and I think this is sort of the problem with especially John and Dave, but with John, they are against the narrative that Kathleen Kennedy has messed up. They are personally against the narrative that
She's the boss.
Lucasfilm. I know, but that's what I'm saying is like, and also Hollywood's such an insular town. Like, I gotta be honest, like, I don't think John Favreau will ever badmouth Kathy Kennedy. Like,
No,
just
of course
period.
not.
Like, I don't
Yeah,
think he
he's
will.
a
So,
respectful guy, and I mean,
yeah,
why would he? We don't even badmouth her. We just think that she's not good for Star Wars.
right. So, but the thing is, for me, like the most important thing, the hardest pill to swallow, I think, for like Lucasfilm employees, John or Dave or whomever, would be that if I really came in and in charge, I would say we are going to signal in a big way that things are going to be different. What that means is admitting that the way things were done before, perhaps in the past 5 years, was not the right way to do them. That's a really hard pill for them to swallow, right? So that's like the whole thing for me. Like that would be so important to if I bought it. And to be honest with you, if John and Dave if nobody was willing to do that, I'd fire everybody. I would literally get rid of everybody. I would gut it completely and start anew. Because, in my opinion, and this
I'm
is
on
just
board.
my opinion, right?
I'm on
Is
board.
that it's too, it's, if it's not too far yet in the scenario we're talking about, it's probably have gotten too far. And, the brand it really has lost its identity. We've lost merchandising, we've lost licensing, we've lost the ability to permeate pop culture. There's no young people coming into the brand. Things are down, right? Like attendance at parks, et cetera, et cetera. So I'd probably announce a big like signal shakeup, whether that was, if John and Dave would come along for this ride, I would absolutely love that. But if not, I'd
We move
probably,
on.
yeah, I'd move on. And I know like this wouldn't be your choice, but I would probably bring Feige in or somebody of Feige's ilk. 100%, I would. And I would say we're gonna take at least at least a year with zero Star Wars content. Because at this point, like they're barely making Star Wars content anyways. But I would say we're doing a hard stop. And the next time you see us talk about Star Wars, we're going to have a grand vision of what Star Wars is going to be moving forward. And we are going to work like demons to make sure that it is up to the standards of George, which brings me to the next thing. And it is absolutely 100% essential. I don't care what you have to do. If you have to literally hit your knees in front of this old New Balance wearing homie, you need George back in some capacity. You need his seal of approval, 100%. So you basically need to get him in a room and explain, if you don't do this, George, even your legacy is going to be affected. You need to like hard sell him on the fact that like it's bad, bro. You know what I
Um,
mean? Like
you know,
it's bad.
yeah, I don't know if he would do that, especially after being so insulted now. But every project you'd have Dave call him. If let's say Dave's on board, you'd have Dave call him and be like, "Hey, like, what do you think about this?" And if George is like, "Yeah, sure," then you do it. But if he's like, "No, we're not doing it," like whatever George says, we do.
Yeah.
And then eventually he's going to be back into it because I mean, we're not shoving him out like Disney did,
Yeah. You
right?
need him involved, even if it's in a superficial way. The problem with George is I don't know how much he can do that. He needs to be like in it. And it's one of
Yeah, I
those
don't know
things
if he
where,
wants to do that.
right, but here's the thing. I think you can strike a balance. like what they do with Toriyama. Okay, so like with Toriyama, like he's
Yeah.
old and doesn't care about Dragon Ball anymore, right? But
Yeah.
they can still get him to like give them sketches, give them premise, give them character, and then they'll go out and fill in the blanks.
Well, he's still like he still checks over a lot of the manga I saw,
I actually
and
don't
he
think he
like
checks over the manga. I think for the movie, for this new one, he was involved in ideas and beats. Like he basically told them, he was like Gohan, Piccolo, like
yeah,
Goku and them, nah, like you know what I mean, and like kind of like
yeah,
did that. But I think at one time he was really involved in the manga, but ever since Torotaro, I want to say Danny would know better than me on
yeah,
this, but
yeah,
I
Dandy.
believe I believe he's the one that told me about this. It's like essentially Torotaro now it's now his show completely with the manga,
Mm,
which some people think has led to some of the weirdness that goes on. But the point is like you in my dream scenario, right? It's like step number one, big time signal to the public that Star Wars is going to come back in a big, big way and that we're doing something really crazy with it.
yeah,
Step number two, getting George involved at some level, even if it's just signing off on things like kind of like what you were saying, right? Um, so that's like key. And then number three is a plan, bro. Imagine that, a
yeah.
plan. And I know that like you were naming off a lot of projects that I think would be really, really fun.
Oh, I'm still not done. I'm so
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and that's I mean, that's awesome. For me, like I
Galaxy's
kind
Edge
of
gotta
want,
go.
yeah, yeah, or change it like top to bottom
1313, the
change.
game, is being released.
Yeah, yeah,
The Darth Maul game being released.
yeah.
All these canceled games that LucasArts had, we're working on them again.
Hmm.
I don't care if it doesn't fit the new canon or the old canon. People don't care. They just want a cool game to play. We can have it in a different universe, whatever. Heck, keep the sequels. I don't give a crap. They're still there. You can still buy the sequels. You can still see them. But it
Hmm.
happened in an alternate timeline. It's a Legends version.
Hmm.
It ain't canon anymore.
Hmm.
We go and remake the sequel trilogy the way George wanted to, with Darth Maul coming back, training Talon, Luke rebanding the Jedi Order through the galaxy, which is now fractured from the void, the vacuum that Palpatine's death has created.
Hmm.
And maybe we'll even throw in some different ideas like Tor Valum or something like that. You know, I'm going to
Yeah,
call
yeah,
up
yeah.
Colin Trevorrow and be like, hey, Colin, I want you on this project, man.
Right, right.
Come and write the sequel trilogy with me.
Yeah. So like
That's it.
I like that idea. My thing would be like the way that I would handle that would be like doing that, but kind of like without saying it out loud. So like essentially I wouldn't retcon the sequels, but I would sort of like again, I would just
Oh, I would,
signal
of course.
that what we're doing
Yeah.
is totally different and what happened before has zero bearing on it, basically. So like essentially the same idea as you, but I just wouldn't
We just
I
wouldn't
wouldn't go
mention it.
that far.
We,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
well, no,
just
we
yeah.
would just wouldn't say anything. We would just go on to create stories, to be honest, in between 7, 8, 9. So it doesn't even fall in
I'd
that
go
timeline.
further. So like I would go to the point. Here's what I would do. I would go at least 100 years into the future, probably more, and then I would have references back to the Skywalker saga, but
Yeah.
not like the sequels. Like I would just talk about like Anakin essentially. Like he would be the only real thing that kept being called back to. And perhaps, and this could be actually really fun, what if like 500 years into the future, the perception of Anakin is completely different than what we as fans know happened, right? Like you could do something like that where it's like a false narration that's sort of been built over time and he's worshipped as something that he wasn't, you know what I mean? Or something like that. Like there's I think
Mm,
an interesting like I'm all about new, man. You know what I mean? Like I'm all about new. I really think that you can capture the spirit of Star Wars and it's very heavy in the themes, but I really don't think you need to keep, you know, cranking out content with the Star Wars IP. Make Star Wars stories. You know what I mean? Which is like a different kind of thing. So,
I'd keep Fallen Order. I'd keep Mandalorian.
mhm.
Um, I'd make a young Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon show. I'd make a young Dooku show. How he fell to the dark side. Everything that's
Yeah,
discussed in the Plagueis novel. Everything that's just discussed in Dooku Jedi Lost, which is new Disney canon. Which, mind you, the books are amazing. The Disney
the books
Star
have
Wars
been pretty
books,
good.
most of them. Some of them are. I'm like, what?
Well, there's a large swath of them that I don't think either of us has really checked out. Like in the past couple of years, I haven't read much of anything in the past couple of years.
No, yeah, well, I
I think
mean,
Master and the Apprentice was the last one I like really dug into, and then the Ronin book. But yeah, that draw's just not there for me anymore. You know what I mean? Which I think is like kind of what we're alluding to, like talking about with the problem. So yeah.
yeah. Well, anyways,